But today, gather around the campfire, dear students. Today, I want you to gather around the virtual campfire and listen to some stories, to some myths about blood and soil. Today, we're going to talk that racist talk. Today, we're going to talk about the Nazis. Is that good? Do you hear me? Are you on board for
Yes.
this?
Yes, teacher.
Yeah, we hear you.
Yes, teacher.
Okay, thank you. So, today we're going to talk about the Nazis. Now, the Nazis are fascists, as we discussed last time, right? I talked about fascism. And the Nazis are a special type of fascist. Nazis are fascists who base their fascism in a racial theory. A lot of fascists. I'm hearing my own voice. It doesn't sound good. That's the other problem. Who is this? Okay. So the echo is gone. Okay. So Nazis are fascists who ground their theory in racial theory, right? Most fascists are a bit racist, but their whole theory is not based on that racism. Racism is just a secondary thing. With the Nazis, it's at the very core of it, right? And at the top, we have also the Nazi flag with the swastika symbol that you probably have seen before. Now, unlike fascism, which is a lot broader and older, Nazism is very historically specific. It can be traced back to Germany and Austria, and more precisely, can be traced back to the figure of Adolf Hitler, who you might know as the dictator of Nazi Germany, right? And he used this ideology in his Nationalist Socialist Party. That's why it's called Nazi. As I explained to you before, this word is bullshit because he killed all socialists. But anyway, that's the word Nazi, right? But as you will soon see, who is this? Miss Camila, you should mute your mic. Okay. As we'll soon see, there's nothing to do with it. So Hitler more or less invented this theory and first wrote about it in his book Mein Kampf, My Struggle, which he wrote in prison. So one of the differences between fascism and Nazism Miss Paula is getting hit by a hurricane. That's not good. Anyway, where was I? I keep getting distracted. One of the differences between Nazism and fascism is that, as we saw with fascism, it is incoherent, right? It is a story of people who just want to get to power, and they will tell you whatever to get to that power, right? So the story they tell is usually things they make up in the moment. Think of Trump, right? There's no real theory to it. With the Nazis, that's different. Nazism is actually a coherent theory, and that's good for me because I can explain it coherently to you. And that is because it has certain scientific pretensions, right? It tries to be a real philosophy, unlike fascism, which is more of an ambition, which makes it easier to teach. Yet it is still fascism. And as we saw last time, fascism includes a lot of lying. All political systems do, but with fascism, it's just a bigger part of the game, right? It's a core tactic of fascists to lie about things. And it means that there are two faces, and it's the same with the Nazis. You have the story, you have the narrative, you have the values and the beliefs that they want to tell people. That's what they want you to believe. And then you have the things that they are doing. You have the tactics, the actions, and the goals that they're trying to achieve in practice. And those sometimes are parallel and sometimes they're different things. So you always have to keep in mind that there are two layers to any stories about fascism. You have the explicit story, and then you have what they're really trying to do. Yeah. And that's no different here. So today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Nazis. And their myth, their story, what they're trying to make you believe, consists of two main components: blood and soil. we're first going to talk about blood. Blood as in your biological inheritance, your DNA, right? What you are made of. They have a theory on how important that is and the connection of a certain people that they have true blood. The Volk, the people who are genetically of the same root. In this case, of course, the white German people. Here we see two fine examples of that. You have the German Uber guy who apparently wears a tie to summer camp. And then you have here the German girl working that pole for fascism. Now, before I start with any of this, I want to make an important disclaimer. Nazi theory, by today's standards, by today's norms and sensitivities, is extremely offensive, especially when it is being explained by a white European towards non-white non-Europeans, right? It's basically a theory of why I am better than you. So please don't confuse the messenger with the message, right? I kind of look like that guy in the picture, but I am not of the same beliefs as him. I'm socialist, not fascist. So please don't confuse that, right? I'm going to say some horribly offensive things, but I have to explain this theory. Do you understand me?
Yes,
Yes, doctor.
yes, teacher.
Okay, so keep that in mind, because we're going to get really racist very soon. So since we're going to be talking about race, right, I want to introduce that by a little note on what race means, because the Nazis use it in a way that is a bit different than we use it in science. So scientifically speaking, right, race is a zoological category, right? It's part of biology. And in its biological sense, in its zoological contemporary sense, race is a distinction between creatures that cannot interbreed. You're of a different race if you cannot make babies with the other, right? So no matter how many times they would try, a tiger and a donkey cannot make a tiger donkey. It's not going to happen, right? So they are apparently of a different race because they cannot have children that can have children together. So to that definition, right, there are no human races. So black and white people and Latinos, right, they are not actually different races because they can procreate together. So that's very important to keep in mind, right? There are no human races. I've tried. You can have kids, but so that's important that the Nazis use it differently, right? And we use it differently too. If you talk about race in a normal political discussion, right, you don't actually mean race. What we really mean is ethnicity, right? We, for whatever reason, we kind of took over this Nazi discourse of treating black and Chinese people and white people as different races, but they're not. They're different ethnicities. They have different certain orderly genetic attributes, but they are all the same race. So the race theory of Nazis is kind of wrong since the beginning. And also if you compare it to the original theory of race, which is of course Darwin's theory of the origin of species, right? The survival of the fittest. It's something that the Nazis are going to talk about. It's important that I quickly tell you what the real survival of. So in his 1859 book, Origin of Species, Charles Darwin laid out the following theory. It hyper summarized, right? First of all, he explains how within nature you have a natural generation of random diversity. We are not literally just the genes of our parents throws in random stuff. So you have, for example, albinos, or you will have people who are is a lot bigger than me or my wife are. Now and then things will be slightly off, right? They look like you in all other ways, but one genetic off, and that is normal. So we have people of different hair colors, we have people of different height, etc., different eye colors, etc. And that comes with nature. Nature has a reason for doing so, because when it creates diversity, right, then at least one out of the existing members of a species, sorry, will be better adapted to new circumstances, right? So what happens is that if you have this diversity in genetic characteristics within one race, then if the race is faced with difficulties, right, that best fit those difficulties, that are best adapted to the circumstances, have a higher rate of survival than the others. And that is what we call and here that this is not in popular culture interpreted the survival of the strongest, survival of the fittest. And fit means best, not fittest as in shape, right? Fittest as in those who fit best to the circumstances. So that doesn't need to be the stronger one. Faced with a lot of tall grass and predators, armed with many claws, then your best way to avoid predators is to hide in the grass, right? Probably gonna die faster, even if you're stronger. So you're not necessarily the strongest. Tells me that I'm not very clear.
Teacher, I think you might be muting a lot.
Give me 1 second. Okay, it is very annoying. I was saying that the theory of survival of the fittest means that you have a natural diversity within races, and some of them are going to be better adapted to circumstances. And if you do this over 10,000s of years, then the species is slowly going to evolve towards the people or the genes that are most adapted to the situation. Okay? Now, the Nazis twisted this idea in their own political interests. They first of all made it an imperative thing. They thought that the strong must survive and the weak should die. While evolution really is a non-intentional process. This happens by accident, right? And it happens very slowly. Nature doesn't want this. It's just a consequence of genetic diversity interacting with the fact that life is hard. Also, in Darwin's theory, diversity is good, because it gives you a higher chance as a species to survive. Well, the Nazis are going to make this a competition for who has the best genes, which in normal survival of the fittest theory, there's no such thing as the best genes. You have the best genes for a particular situation, right? But not in general. Do you understand me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Then let's move on to axial Nazi theory, because I'm losing a lot of time. So, let's get into the Nazi mindset, right? The first thing we must understand about their race theory is how they conceive of progress. They don't think of progress as creating having more goods or any of this stuff. They through the survival of the fittest. Progress is evolution. You genetically, that your country genetically gets better because the strong survive and the weak are eliminated. So progress to them is understood in a biological sense, that the race is getting stronger, right? Not an ethical sense, not an economical sense. It means that the people themselves are progressing genetically. They're becoming more fit and through competition. So in their right, it's all about the improvement of the race in a physical sense, in a inside sense. And from this worldview, right, where there's this survival of the fittest, creates a hierarchy between races, because some are going to be better than others. Not just within, not just between species, but also within them. So for them, inequality is natural, and it is even good because it helps to select the weak from the strong, right? So you between countries you have a hierarchy, but also inside a country you have something like a natural elite, right? Nazis were elitists. The elite was simply seen as better than the common people. Now, how do you make progress, right? How do you improve the race? Well, by making it pure is the idea. You improve, like if you were trying to breed a very big dog, for example. Well, then the worst thing you can do is mixing races. Because let's say we were creating this ever better white person, and then suddenly you throw in a Latino, right? That's a step back because all these Latino genes are then invading the pure whiteness of the person, or the Chinese genes, or the African genes, right? So you're now muddying the water. You're spoiling a good project by mixing races because it degrades the higher race, right? It's nice for the lower race because they have children that are better than their parents, but for the white person it is worse because their children are not as good as they could have been, right? So that's the big problem, according to the Nazi view, is the influence of these other races, both genetically but also culturally, right? They stink. They're unsavage. They're savages. They're uncivilized. They have nothing. The problem are these other races, right? They kind of always are holding the white man, bothering him with their problems by mixing with them, etc. Now these races, these other races, right, they come in basically 3 tiers. If we would make a tier list of races, right, there are 3 big groups there. You have at the top, you have the races that create great civilizations. These are races. You'd have white people, right, and then also Japanese would be in the top tier. Then below that, you have most of the other races, which are average. They're not bad nor good. They're useless for improving the genetic quality of civilization because they have nothing better to offer than the number 1 races. But they're not evil either. They just exist, right? And they can be put to use by the others. So these are Africans, Latinos, Arabic people, etc. And then below that, you have, lastly, the races that are evil. Races that are not just useless, they actually take us back, right? They stop progress. They always get in the way of things. They are cultural destroying races. Now, according to this theory, right, it is the duty of the higher races to make use of the others, to rule over the lower races and also to exploit them, right? To put these useless races to good use, because genetically they're worthless. So at least we're going to use them for, we can make them work. So it is also justification for colonialism, a very different justification, but one nonetheless. However, the races that are culture destroying, the anti-race, the bad ones, well, they must be eliminated because they're just a plague upon the world. They're holding evolution back. Pause button. This sounds all pretty funky, right? I just, like, all of this is morally objective. I really just want to point out number 2 here. This is just not true. Biologically speaking, right? Inbreeding does not make races stronger, or does not make breeds stronger. In general, in nature, mixing races actually makes them stronger, not weaker. Well, not races, mixing gene pools, mixing ethnicities makes them stronger. So the Nazis were very wrong here. But anyway, you understand me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm super paranoid now with the connection quality. So then who are these races, right? Who's at the top? Well, at the top, within the number 1 tier, right? At the very top, you have the master race called the Aryans. Now, Miss Juno, have you ever met an Aryan? Do you know any Aryans well?
I don't think so, no.
You don't? Okay. Well, I have good news for you. You have met at least one Aryan. He's talking to you. The Aryans are my ethnicity. I am Aryan. I'm taller than most of you. I'm relatively broad. I have light eyes. I'm white, and I have blonde hair. These are Aryans, right? Aryans are Northern European people, like me. So they are, I'm sorry to inform you, we are apparently the master race. So yeah, that's how it is, people. Come on now, stop complaining. So we the Aryans, we are the master race, according to Nazi ideology. We made everything that's good in the world. Inventions were done by Aryans, according to Nazis. And even if they didn't do it, then it was somehow inspired by them. They had whole kind of weird histories about how it can be traced back to a white man. And so they believe. The only thing is wrong with me is my nose is a bit Jewish looking, so they won't like that. But and they believe that these Aryans, these Nordic people, that they had Germany as their home country, right? That Germany was the heartland. Although that's not really true because they're from Northern Europe, not Central Europe. But anyway, right? They made it look like that Germany was the real homeland of the Nordic people, even if they're from Norway. It's really Germany. So their nation was a nation of Aryans, was a nation of the master race. And their racism, right? What I told you so far is just ignorant rather than racist, right? It's just, which you could think maybe physically, right? Because Nordic people are on average quite large compared to other human ethnicities. But their racism, the real racism, is not that. The real racism, dear students, is the belief that there's a relationship between ethnicity and mental faculties, right? It's not just that you're different on the outside, it's the idea that you're different on the inside, that different races think differently. Just like you and a dog have a different consciousness of the world, right? You have to be a different interface in how you experience the world. The Nazis believed that different human races had simply different logic, a different psychology, that they saw the world different, right? Almost as if one saw more colors than the other. And if that is true, right, then it means that there's no real talking to the other races. I mean, they can understand you, but they can never really understand how you see the world because they simply think differently, right? And that's really racist, right? If you believe that because your skin color is different, you genetically think differently. But they thought there was this difference. And of course, the Aryans are the smartest and the most conscious of these races. And these Aryans, well, they're in quite a tough spot, because although they're the master race, they are stuck on Earth together with all these bastards, right? They're stuck on this ball in space with all these savage races, with these stinky, lazy, aggressive races. And so the Aryans, they really have to preserve themselves, right? They have to focus on keeping their own race going, because they're humanity's only hope, right? To carry on their natural genetic superiority. And so they really have to focus on the group. They have to focus on getting kids. They have to focus on having more Aryans to compete with these savages. So in practice, this means that Nazism is very community oriented. It's not about the individual, right? If you were, let's say, a very athletic man, and you would be like, I want to be a fashion model. They'd be like, bitch, shut up, you're going to the army. But I want to do fashion. You're going to the army, motherfucker. We need to defy the other races, right? There was no just being there for yourself. You had to put in work for the race. So that also came with some sorts of socialist-like elements, for example, healthcare, because they wanted to have as many kids and as many soldiers as possible to fight this fight against the other races. So they did take care of their own people, at least in a biological sense, right? So their values are not freedom and equality, right? Their values are discipline and honor, because this is survival logic. It's us against the world, right? It's the purity of the white man against the savage bastardry of the rest. So that's the master race. But who's on the other side of this spectrum, right? So we have everyone else, Latinos, etc., in between. But who's then on the bottom? Well, unsurprisingly, they are the Jews. You might have heard about Nazis and the Jews. So the other races might be inferior and useless, but the Jews are actually evil. They're a problem. They're not just in the way, they are the enemy. And thus they must be fought. Now, why pick the Jews, right? Why did Hitler choose to single out Jewish people? Which is not, at first glance, a self-evident pick, because Jewish people are racially not that different from white or Arabic people. They're kind of a mix of those two. And Hitler was quarter Jewish himself, so why would he pick them? Well, he picked them because it was a choice. This was all a deliberate lie from the beginning, because they were the easiest target. He knew if he chose the Jews as his ultimate enemy, that a lot of people would join in on that, because people already hated Jews, and they kind of still do, right? There's a lot of people who don't like Jewish people because of Israel, for good reasons. And back then, a lot of people also didn't like Jewish people. They didn't like them on the left, because Jewish people tend to be rich, and especially, you still have this today, the idea of the Jewish bankers who control the world. And all conspiracy theorists like this stuff, right? And back then they also liked it. So the left didn't like the Jews because they associate them with the capitalist class. But the right, the elite, also didn't like the Jews because Marx was a Jew. So they associated communism with Judaism. So in the end, you could make both of them believe that the Jews were the problem, right? And so it was very easy to blame the Jews, also because they were weak enough to suppress, right? The Nazis would win this fight, but they were strong enough to be a credible enemy. So they were just strong enough to blame everything on them. And Hitler literally blamed everything on them. The loss of World War I, the economical problems, the health problems, corruption. All of this was the fault of the Jews. And then logically, if you blame them for everything, people are going to demand you to get rid of them at some point. And that's what he did, right? This ended in an attempt to simply exterminate the Jewish people, to get rid of them altogether. which accumulated in an event called the Holocaust, where they deliberately tried to kill 5 million people in an industrial fashion. I'm not going to talk about that much today because the text you have to read is about that, right? I just want to point out that Jewish people are not even an ethnicity, right? They're no races, but Jewish people, like, Jewish people are not a thing. Judaism is a religion, right? It's not. Jewish people have very little in common in how they look. You have certain types of Jews that look alike because they inbreed, but you know, there's a lot of Jewish people who have nothing in common. Like Bernie Sanders, for example, he just looks like another white guy. So it's kind of hard to identify them, but they did that anyway, right? They wanted to get rid of them because it was part of their big plan. Now, why was all of this happening, right? As I told you, there's a difference between the Nazi story and the actual political intent of this. And we cannot exactly tell that because of all the lies. It's hard to see through it. So I'll give you my version of things, right? My understanding is that this whole theory was a lie from the beginning to just justify the dominance of a certain capitalist elite, to which, well, Hitler didn't belong to them, but they were the people behind him. I don't think Hitler believed too much of this himself when he wrote it. I think he just thought of a theory that people would like, that would put them in power. Because you have to think of the functions of this race theory, right? First of all, it allows you to project all the problems and all the conflicts on the Jews, right? So you don't need to solve anything. Hitler didn't solve many problems, contrary to what might some people believe. He actually didn't do that much for Germans. He just distracted them by blaming this on other people. And it allowed him to also unify the classes a bit, right? You could tell, you could tell the poor people, oh, but the Jewish elite, the capitalist elite is keeping you down. And you could tell the rich people, oh, but let me protect you from these Jewish communists. And, it's not possible because they're opposites, but he could do that, right? He could kind of unify these different classes against an imaginary enemy. And if you expand that outside, it also helps to unify the classes, because the working class hate their elite, but if you tell them, oh, but the Africans are going to invade and rape your woman, then okay, then let's buy the Africans instead. So it allowed Hitler to kind of pacify normal class warfare in his country by inventing this third enemy and having everybody fight them. Also, it justified imperialist policies. It's a new justification to conquer other countries and to exploit them, right? In a kind of new fashion. So the real plan was just to enslave these other races to feed Germany and also to exterminate the Jews. So how does this work? Well, first you blame all problems on the Jews, which means you don't have to solve them. You're now solving the problem means killing the Jews, right? Instead of actually. Then you steal from these Jewish people and you use that money to pay for socialist policies that you normally should pay from taxes from rich people, but you don't want to do that because they're your homies. So you just kill the Jews and take their stuff. And then if the Jews complain too much about this, you just kill them all and nobody know what happened, right? That's the real plan. So in practice, what was this like to live in Germany, right? Well, one consequence of this blood theory is the encouragement of population growth. So they wanted to have as many white people, as many Aryans as possible. So they wanted people to have as many kids as possible. There's a positive side to this in the sense that they would subsidize you to do so. The government would pay you if you had many kids, and they would pay you increasingly more the more kids you have, and you would get medals and all of that stuff. But it also meant that they had a very clear expectation that women should have children, right? Women could work, but children would always have the priority here. So you just need to get, stop it, Astrid, stop this studying and get pregnant. Please do something for the nation, right? That was the attitude of the Nazis. So stop all this foolishness, girls, drop out of college, please, and get to work. But it's not really the evil side of that. The evil side of that is eugenetics. Eugenetic policies. Eugenetics means gene hygiene. So not hygiene as in keeping your hands clean, but hygiene as in keeping your blood clean, keeping your blood pure. We need to wash away the impurities. How do we do that? Well, not interbreeding to start with, but also by sterilizing weaker groups, right? Or killing them. So people with handicaps, for example, right? Better make sure they never have children, either by sterilizing them or if they keep trying, just kill them, right? So you would have to get rid of the weak people, any type of, Down syndrome, all this stuff, and to get rid of them. But not just physically, also mentally, right? The mentally weak and the physically handicapped would be killed. And also, these silly gay people, they're also making the race weaker with all their decadent nonsense. So let's get rid of them too. And basically all these freaks, right? All of them dead or sterilized. That's the plan. That's how you improve the race. And then when it comes to the Jewish people, they, of course, tried to prosecute them, right? They made laws against the Jews since the 1930s, and those laws increasingly grew worse. My son is protesting to all this racism. So first, you want to separate the Jews. They have to identify themselves as them. They couldn't have certain jobs, they couldn't join the army, they couldn't have bank accounts, blah, 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 blah. Eventually, they start taking their stuff to pay for their other policies. And then lastly, they try to kill them. All of them. Do you have any questions so far about this part?
No.
Nobody?
Very clear, teacher.
Okay. So you're all fine with all this racism. Okay, I get it. Now, then let's talk about the second part, which it's not just about blood. It's not just about creating better genes. It's also about creating a better environment. It's about it's also about soil. So we saw that there was one theory, right? The racism, which was based on a interpretation of survival of the fittest, a very wrong interpretation, but nonetheless interpretation of genetics, right? It had some scientific pretensions. But their imperialism, the fact that they tried to conquer the world, which they did, was based on a theory of geography. They had a very particular theory on how countries work. The idea is very simple. The idea is that if countries are bigger, they're stronger. It's the idea that the strength of a country, right, could be seen in how much geographical space it has. It's a bit like hunting grounds with predators, right? If a certain predator has a lot of hunting grounds, that must mean they're doing better than the ones that don't have much hunting ground. So they wanted to have more hunting grounds for the Aryans, let's say, right? The more space, the better. This theory is called the theory of Lebensraum. Lebensraum, if your German is good, means life space. Leben means life, Raum means space. It's the idea that the Aryans needed more space to develop as a race, right? One of the reasons that they were held back is because they were stuck in Germany, while all these other useless races were taking up all this space and procreating like bunnies, while the poor white man didn't have enough room to go walking his dog. So we needed more life space for the white people. And if they only had more space, then they would procreate more and the white race would be better off. That's the idea of Lebensraum. Right? So that means that if you're expanding as a nation, you're doing good, right? If you can grow, that shows vitality. Just like having kids shows vitality, shows that you're doing good. If you can expand your borders, that also means you're doing good. And Hitler here, he was very frustrated with the other white countries. Because the other white countries, they had conquered the world, but they didn't take the world. They would go to, I don't know, Mexico, and then just enslave you all and take your stuff, but they wouldn't take your land, right? They wouldn't come here and then populate this area. So they would have all these African colonies, and they would just take goods from the Africans, but they didn't go there. They didn't fully conquer that land, right? They didn't go there and insert white people there. And Hitler thought they were basically playing with their food. It's like, you have the whole world, but you're not using it. You're not using all this space. This is decadent. You're wasting opportunities. So he said, let me try it, right? Let Germany take the wheel, and we're going to take those same colonies and we're going to put them to use. We're going to populate them with white people. So to survive, the idea is that your race and your nation constantly has to grow. You constantly need to expand your borders because you're in direct competition with other races that are trying to do the same thing, right? So again, it's kill or be killed. And if this is true, then you constantly need to take land from other races to keep being the fittest. That means that this theory of Lebensraum leads to permanent war, right? Because you always need to keep growing, and that has to come at the cost of other people's land. So this theory kind of dooms Nazi Germany to permanent and total war. As Goebbels said, we want the totale Krieg, the total war, which means normal war means that you're fighting over something in particular, like a mine or a part of the sea or a hill or a river, right? In total war, you're not fighting over any specific thing. You're fighting just to kill the enemy, right? It's a fight of everyone versus everyone, a war of extinction. And that's what you're trying to do, because you're not trying to conquer another land to rule over them, like the Romans did that. They try to conquer the other land to take that land and to kill the people in that land. Yes. So when they conquered, for example, when they conquered Russia, they killed all the people they saw because they wanted that land for themselves. They didn't want to dominate them. They wanted everything, right? Nivea asks, sorry to interrupt myself. Nivea asks, I didn't quite understand the part where you said that against use capitalism. So in society, Ms. Nivea, you have, as we saw with Marx, class warfare, right? You have the working class, you have the capitalists. Each ideology needs to deal with that problem. Hitler did not want to deal with that problem. So what he tried to do is he kind of took class warfare and projected it on the Jews. He would tell the poor people, you know, yes, the capitalist class are bad to you, but really they're not all capitalists. They're the Jewish capitalists. They're the bankers. They're the financial elite. They're the problem, right? Because a lot of banks were Jewish for historical reasons. Because in the Middle Ages, Christianity technically does not allow you to take interest on a loan. So being a banker is according to the Bible, is an evil activity. Jewish people have the same rule, but they only go for other Jewish people. So they can make loans to non-Jewish people. Yes. So within medieval society, Jews are the ones who had to do the financing because they were morally allowed to do so. That's why Jews historically are bankers, and therefore they're associated with capitalism, right? On the other hand, Karl Marx was a Jew. So to the rich people, Hitler would say, you know, the working class, yes, they're trying to get you, but it's not them, it's these Jewish troublemakers, right? These communists, they're the ones who are the real trouble. So he would focus the attention on both classes. Instead of fighting each other, they would be fighting the Jews. Does that make sense, Ms. Nivea?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
It's a giant trick, right? So anyway, this leads to war. Now, where is this war going to go? Okay, we're at the point now. I'll take attendance, but I'm going to keep talking. You can stay if you want to, but if you need to go, you can leave, and I won't hate you for it. Let's see. Attendance. Okay. So I'm going to keep talking, right? So how are we going to expand? Right? We need more Lebensraum. Let's look at this map. Where are we going to go? So we start, the Aryans, right, start in Central Europe. Germany, Hungary, and Austria. Those were the lands of the Nazis. We're not going to go up, because that's where the Aryans come from, right? From Scandinavia, from Nordic land, the Vikings. They're already there. We don't need to conquer that. We're not going to go over the sea, because we don't have a lot of sea. We're not going to go to the west, because there's other white people there. Not necessarily Aryans, but white people nonetheless. And besides that, you know, it's a bit of a waste of blood to fight other white people. They beat us in World War I. So we're scared of them as well. We could go south, because there's less white people there. And those stinky Italians. But those Italians are on our side, right? They've sworn alliance to us. So we're not going to go there either. So the only option is to go east, right? There are a lot of lands there. It keeps going all the way to eastern China, right? You can march straight east and keep going. So there's a lot of Lebensraum over there. And there are no white people. Well, they're kind of white people, because you have Slavic people, which are white, but they're of a different ethnicity and they're somehow inferior, whatever. And then you get Chinese and Arabs and all these other motherfuckers and Indians. So it's okay to take their land. It's okay to conquer them. Right, that's the idea. By the way, I don't know how much clarity we have on World War II. So for some of you, a quick recap of what the teams are, right? On the Allied team, we had France, United Kingdom, Belgium, United States, a bunch of other smaller countries, and Russia. This was one team. On the other team, on Team Nazis, you had Germany, Austria-Hungary, which was one country. You had Romania, you had Italy, you had Japan, and you had Finland and some other. Never forget this, the Finnish were Nazis. Somehow history has forgotten this, but they were on the Nazi side. They killed millions of people. So Team Germany, right, Team Nazis was going to expand eastwards, and the Japanese were going to come from the east, going westwards. It was kind of the plan to conquer the whole Eurasian continent and part of Africa. That was Italy's job. So the plan is, first we're going to attack the weak eastern countries, like Poland, for example. That's where they started with, and then we get Romania and all these other, and Ukraine and Bulgaria, and you know, we're going to conquer them first. That will probably trigger war with the West, which it did. So we're not going to destroy the West because there are other white people. We're just going to immobilize them. And then at some point, we will have a war with the Soviet Union. Because if you keep going to the east, you're going to very quickly run into communist territory. And so Hitler knew he had to fight them. The drama of history is that Stalin did not know this. So Stalin, as I told you before, was a very paranoid man. He thought everyone was about to kill him, except the people that were actually trying to kill him. Right? He didn't see Hitler coming, which is maddening for such a paranoid person. He didn't see it coming. The Germans were all there with their army, and the day before the war started, Stalin was still thinking, nah, he's not going to do it. He's just there for a military exercise or something, but 4 million people on my border. And then they did attack, of course. So, what is the plot behind this theory, right? By the way, you're recording this, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Otherwise, it's a bit of waste. Again, we don't know, but this is my vision on it, right? Again, this whole Lebensraum theory is kind of a lie. It's a kind of a justification for your normal capitalist imperialism. The real objective was not to take this land for white people to live, because they tried it and nobody actually wanted this. So they were like, oh, we conquered, I don't know what. We conquered Croatia, or we conquered Bulgaria. So and we killed a bunch of people there. So now if you want to live on a farm in Bulgaria, right, sign up here. And then all the Germans were like, nah, I'm good. I'm happy living in Berlin. And Nazis were like, come on, Lebensraum, let's go. You can own 400 acres of land. Just move to Russia. And the people were like, nah. So they didn't actually want this. This was just a story. What they really wanted from these lands were their resources, of course, right? And their markets for their industries to export to. They wanted their oil, not literally their land to live in. Really, the war was there to support national industry, to give them resources, to give them slaves, to give them export markets. Because Germany was doing bad, and they tried to solve that by basically starting this empire. It was just colonialism. One of the proof that they were not really trying to grow the white man's race is that they sent 10 million white working class people to die, right? To die to fight the communists for, I don't know really what reason. So they were not actually doing, they were not growing the race, period, right? The race was decreasing rapidly because you keep sending them to fight other people for some nonsense. They also never really planned to be self-sufficient, right? If you're the master race, you probably can handle things on your own, but that was not their plan. They wanted to rule these other races, to exploit them. You'll see this in the book, even other white people. The plan was just to accumulate all the wealth within Germany, right? Like a standard empire. And they tried to simply deal with their own problems, and they had many, by placing this burden on other people, right? By your standard colonialist thing. You would take from others, and that's how you pay for your own stuff without raising taxes. You just steal from other countries. You steal their technology, you steal their people, you steal their resources. And then it's quite easy to have a good government, right? Sometimes people say, oh, but the Nazis, they were well organized. Yeah, because they didn't pay their own bills. And they were not well organized, by the way. But they got things done. They got things done because they would just steal from everyone. It's fairly easy to do that, right? But if you were really convinced that you were the best, I thought I was the best, I would stay on my own. I would try and not meddle with other people because I didn't need them. But really they did. Now, what happened, right? What happened in history? How did this go down? Well, Germany, under the Nazi rule, right? They first won elections. So Hitler won elections once. He didn't win majority of elections. He just got in parliament. Then I think he invented this plot where there was some terrorist attack done, I think, by anarchists. But he said the communists did it. And then they killed the communists preventively. So the communists were about to win. Communists were about to win elections. But then he invented this plot. He blamed them for it. Then they arrested and killed the communists. Then he took their seats in parliament. Then his Nazi party was suddenly a lot bigger. Then he won next elections. Then again, he invented some kind of plot. He murdered the socialists then. And then he basically just took the power, right? At the cost of the left in this case. And he never gave it back. There were no elections after that. So he only, he got democratically elected, yeah, but not like that, There's a lot of cheating involved. So he turned Germany into a totalitarian state. What does that mean? So far we've discussed absolutism, right? For example, with the theory of divine right, the idea that the king has all the power, right? The head of the state has all the power. But in absolutism, that is not necessarily a problem for your life, Ms. Ellison, if you lived in an absolute state, because the king doesn't know you. And the king, he's not necessarily going to use that power to mess with your life, because he doesn't know you and he doesn't care, right? As long as you don't threaten his power, all this power is not going to come raining down on your head. But in a totalitarian state, now the leader still has all the power, but it now applies to all things, right? This power is not just used to defend his own position. It is used to control you, like Hobbes thought about things, right? This tyrannical state, that's totalitarianism, when the power is total. So the state here controlled everything except business, because the state was run by capitalists, right? So, well, it was corporatism, so they did influence business sometimes. But they more or less left that alone in compared to other things. What they did not leave alone was a family life, because you needed to have kids. They would tell you who you could date. Oh, don't be with that Jewish person. Don't be with that black guy now. Those Latino girls, I'm not with them, right? They would fully control education, feed people these racist ideas. They would change religion. They would use sports again for ideological purposes. They would let the white people win on purpose in sports, so people would believe that white people were superior. They would change everything. And some people would say that's comparable to the communism I've explained earlier this week. But communism, the state is total in the sense that it owns everything. Just like in capitalism, the capitalist class owns everything. In communism, the state owns everything, therefore they control everything. But they're doing that to manage the economy. They're not trying to micromanage your life in Soviet Union. They were not trying to tell you who you could kiss, right? Or, your son looks kind of gay, might sterilize him, right? You wouldn't get a letter like that in your mail. But in Nazi Germany, they did. It was about, they wanted your blood, right? To control you. A lot of people like this, but anyway, they had their own internal police called the Schutzstaffel, the SS. This was an army within the army that would push this racist ideology. Another thing I want to note is that although they had a whole theory about discipline and order, this was not how it was. This was all fake. This was facade. Nazi Germany was a very chaotic place, very corrupt. They were not efficient, although that's their cultural image. They were not. They would waste a lot of stuff. Most of their people were crooks. There was so much corruption. Everyone on Hitler's staff was corrupt. All the way down, also working with business, falsifying contracts, all of it. It was only kept alive by taking from other people, right? And this did end at the end of the day, because they picked too much of a fight. They picked a fight with the communists, and they got wrecked. They got completely destroyed and pillaged by them in World War II. To their surprise, they were like, oh my God, these Russians, they look really angry. Why is that? I mean, we killed 28 million of them, but still, why are they so angry, man? So that happened. So they were not that superior after all, because they got crushed, losing 10 million of white people in this struggle to procreate the white race. It wasn't very efficient for us blonde people. It costed us actually a lot. So the story did not end well, right? Now, where is that today? Oh, by the way, small anecdote talking about German industry. Did you know Porsche, the luxury car brand, were Nazi? Now you know. They made weapons for the Nazis during World War II. Don't drive a Porsche, the Nazis. But today, right? Where is Nazism today? Well, there are no Nazi countries in the world, right? There are a lot of fascist countries. So fascism made a big comeback. That's probably the most important thing politically that happened in the last 10 years. Of the last decade, the most significant event is the comeback of fascism. So we have fascism, just some examples here at the bottom. You have Duterte, not Duarte, Duterte from the Philippines, very aggressive president, among other things. Has a policy of killing drug addicts, not imprisoning, not curing, but killing them to, purify the nation. Next to him, does anybody know who this is? This ugly looking guy with a microphone.
I don't remember his name, but he worked for Trump, I think. Yes.
His name is Steve Bannon. He was Trump's chief strategist at the beginning. He is he's clearly a fascist guy. He's very smart. If you'd ever watch an interview with him, he's a very smart person. But on the fascist side of things, he's the most Nazi-like. Like, he's actually racist. Then you have my man Vladimir Putin. Yes, I put him here. I would categorize Putin as some sort of neo-fascist. He works together with his industrial elite. He has this hyper-nationalism, he has all the strong guy politics, he lies all the time, he's very corrupt. Not very democratic person. Next to him, you have probably the most successful out of these people. This is Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary. Hungary turned fascist again, which is scary because Hungary is one of the countries that was Nazi in the beginning, right? And then next to him, you have your boy Jair Bolsonaro. Jair Bolsonaro, president of Brazil. Probably, well, him and Bannon, probably most clear-cut fascist. Like, Bolsonaro is a very pure case of this ideology. Partly you can see it in him refusing to try to stop COVID, right? Because only weak people will die, but the strong will survive. That's a very fascist thing, right? This is explicit, like he doesn't want the government to act on this. So he is also on that end. But most of these, with the exception of Bannon, are not really Nazis, right? For example, Duterte is not white, so he's no racist ideology here. So Nazism is not coming back, probably. Fascism is back, Nazism probably not. Why? Because it's limited to white people, right? It's not for everyone. It's limited to white people and idiots. Those idiots exist. Now and then I meet Mexicans who sympathize with the Nazis. And they want to talk about this to me, because I'm Aryan, I guess. So this is always awkward. I remember this one time I was coming home from a party. I was in the parking lot with my wife, and this dude starts talking to me. He starts yelling from like inside the club. He's like, Hitler wasn't so bad after all. I was like, oh my God, not now. And he came talk to me and, oh, you know, you guys are so great and this and that. And like, I'm not a Nazi, I'm just white. He was like, no, but Germany. And I keep trying to explain to him that, dude, you're brown. You cannot be a Nazi. Hitler would kill you if he could, right? But somehow, I don't know, there still happen to be idiots who are not white who think that they can be Nazis. But you can't. So it doesn't work for most people on Earth, because most people on Earth are not white, and it doesn't work in today's globalized world, because you would have to attack China frontally, which you probably would not survive. So it's not coming back in this racial form, but doesn't mean that it's totally gone, right? It's not going to come back to power, but neo-Nazis still exist. Neo-Nazi parties exist in many countries. You have the Ku Klux Klan, for example, in the United States, and they have all these paramilitary groups and guys who like to play with guns, and they do terrorist attacks, etc. So they do exist still, and their ideas are still popular. So no politician is going to be explicitly Nazi, because you couldn't in these times. But these genetic racist ideas are still there. They're just not expressed very much publicly, but they're there. You can easily find them on the internet, right? They're not in the newspapers, but they definitely are on Reddit or Twitch or any other of these places where you can hear people's opinions, and people's opinions can be very racist. I'm going to demonstrate this to you. This is when I first made this class in 2017. While typing, I was checking YouTube, and there was a hunger crisis going on in Somalia. So in Somalia, it didn't rain for 1 year. No rain, nothing. So they were dying of hunger because it didn't rain, right? These were the comments. This was just from the first page of that. This was CNN or something. This is the first page of results of comments for this new item. So this is a bit small, but so you can read. The guy with the bird picture. Germany got destroyed twice in 3 decades. Yet they got back on its feet both times to become a global power. The world has pulled billions and billions into Africa. The most mineral-rich country, blah, 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 blah. The average IQ in the place is 65. That's ridiculous. You couldn't even speak if you had 65 IQ. So maybe we should see them, we should not feed them, blah, 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 blah. Right? We should not feed them because they can't afford it. They're too weak. Kaiser, he's a bit very explicit about this. Except Jesus or burn, Then Mr. Salgonman says, you can read this very explicit Nazi stuff. Oh, you're talking. Probably you cannot hear me. The slide didn't change. Okay. Well, anyway, you can see this is first page commentary on the hunger crisis, which happened because of climate reasons, right? This was not Somalians' fault. It just didn't rain, so their complete harvest failed. But you can see how people think, right? And these are Americans. So you can already see that the Nazism is alive. I'm going to give you another example from Belgium, my own country. So Belgium was conquered by the fascists, but apparently we didn't learn our lesson. And the examples I'm going to give you are from a student group. So this is a student circle, right? Something like Messa Directiva, but then fascist. Is there really a difference? No, that's a joke. Called Schild en Vrienden. So these guys were a right-wing student group that were accused of being Nazis, but they always denied it. Until somebody